Hey there, Afrodo Reviews here, coming to you with another end of the month post. Now, for those of you who don't know, this is where I go in what I wanted to do last month, talk about it generally, the books I read, and plans I had that I didn't quite get to. Then I could talk about what I'm going to do next month, and some things about the channel going forward. And then I'm going to end this specific video on the Midyear Freakout challenge. So, let's get started, because I hear that can go for a while. But anyways, for those of you keeping up with the channel, you know the books I've reviewed have been pretty mixed bag. I've read one of the worst books I ever read this year, as well as a surprisingly decent young adult novel. With young adult novels often running the gambit between being... I've never really met any that are just plain awful, but they are often very disappointing because they don't quite do a lot with their subject material. But anyways, yeah. Originally, I wanted to do Pride Month as a solely LGBT books, but as I was planning it, I realized I don't have a varied enough selection to properly do that. I've mentioned this before, but my selection mostly includes 2 Casey McQuiston books. McQuiston? I think that's how you pronounce her name. This is basically the LGBT books that I have on hand. Now, I've only really read this one, Gearbreakers, which I found good, if a bit disappointing in terms of story. But, as you can see, I don't really have a lot of variety. I have a couple on my Kindle, but in my own personal preference, I just cannot read Kindle books as easily as I can physical stuff. It's a mental block I have. I don't know what it is. But effectively, I just... When it comes to books specifically, I can do like comic books and stuff. I can do comic books or mangas, mostly because of the pictures. I don't know what it is about the books. So I apologize. But if you are looking for a decent, more modern LGBT novel, I have read this one. It's good. There's some problems with it. I'll probably do a review on it eventually, but it's a good book. I would get it. This is a debut novel, so it's not going to be stellar, but it is good. So, originally, my plan wasn't even really to end the month on the segmented book review that I did. I just, I read that, and it was just so bad I couldn't not talk about it. And I've been out of town for the past 8 days. I was going to try to do that as throughout 1 week and then release a Gearbreaker review during the last Monday. Last Monday. But while editing the last layover review, I realized I'm not going to have time to edit a Gearbreaker review. So, apologies when it comes to that. Now, for July. The July TBR is going to be based on nostalgia for me. You see, July is my birth month. And I decided that, you know what, I'm going to revisit some old classics of mine. So, the books that I read as a kid loved and were the reasons I stayed with reading. So I figured I'd go through those, see if they still hold up to a more mature version of myself. See if they're still actually good, or it was a kid me loving a book. I'll probably still love them even for that. But it's kind of one of those, why not, you know? So, the actual list of TBR. I'm going to start with Aragon by Christopher Paolini. I think that's how you pronounce his name. Now, I would show off a book here, but I left it in my car. And the car is not currently at my residence. So, I do have a physical copy, and I will be reading it. But for now, just see this version. After Aragon, I will be doing an old classic of mine, The Land, by Mildred D. Taylor. See, this was one of the first realistic fiction books I read. That's a good way of putting it. I didn't know it was a prequel at all when I read it the first time, so I'm going to apologize. I have no idea what Roll of Thunder, Hear Me Cry is. But The Land was the first book I read in a world that, well, not really. It's my first adult book-ish, I guess, in a way of saying. As you can see, this is not quite something you would expect a kid to be reading. But it's basically a story about, if I remember it right, it has been some time, a young kid with his half-black half-brother who breaks off from his father, and they basically both try to make their way in life. Set during the time when, just after slaves had been freed, so there's quite a bit of racial tension in this area. I remembered really falling in love with this story. This was the first one I really felt deeply broken with some of the tragedies that happened throughout the book. So, I'm hoping this holds up pretty well. This next book I will be reading is Holes by Louis Satcher. Now this is I guess would be the first realistic fiction book I really read. This is the first book that I read that could take place in our real world with characters that could really exist and a story that could actually happen. And it definitely is more of a kid's book compared to The Land. But I remember liking it, and I want to see if it holds up pretty well. So, yeah. After that, I will be talking about this. And finally, I will end the month off, ideally if I plan myself right, with The Lightning Thief. Yeah, by Rick Riordan. This is a book. As you can see, this is a very well-worn book I've had. I have had this book since middle school, and that's been over a decade ago now. So yeah, this is a very worn copy. But this is, yeah, here's a good idea how worn it is. This was before Disney owned everything. It's back when Hyperion and Miramax were the publishers of the Percy Jackson series and Riordan's work, not Disney. But yeah, I remember loving this. I still love this series. I have Riordan's... I have the start of the Magnus Chase books. I have the Red Pyramid. I have every book with Percy Jackson in it. So, yeah. I'm hoping this holds up. I have high hopes for this one. In addition to that, I'm going to be reading some stuff in the background. This is stuff I may or may not talk about as time goes on. This is mostly just books I'm reading to read. These books currently are Leave the World Behind by Rumaan Alam. I think that's how you pronounce his name. I picked this up initially because it had a similar premise to The Last Layover, and I wanted to see someone try to do that kind of plotline right. And it's definitely better, but it's a very weird book. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I'm about 41 pages in, and I'm just like, I'm scratching my head trying to figure out. This book is just weird. That's best I can leave it at. Then I am currently reading The Night Gardener by Jonathan Auxier. It is a story about a group of Irish siblings who travel to work as servants in an English manor. However, dark forces are at work. This is definitely more of a young adult horror book. So, yeah. So far, what I've read, it's actually pretty decent. It sets the scene pretty well. The characters are well fleshed out, so, yeah. And finally, Wesley Chu's Time Salvager. Now, this book is another one of those. It sounded interesting, so I picked it up just to see what it was like. And honestly, looking at it, what I've read so far, I'm on chapter 5. It's pretty decent. I mean, it involves time travel, so I'm sure it's going to get even weirder as time goes on. So, yeah. I'll let you guys know how it is. So, yeah, that's my July TBR. For now, anyways. I'll probably pick up another book every so often. Anyways. I also want to inform you that I am going to be trying to switch up the style a bit more in my reviews again. I'm going to drop the more formatting area I have and just going to try to talk about the book a bit more. Not quite as in-depth as The Last Layover, but somewhere in the middle between The Last Layover and the normal style I have been doing up until this point. I want to see how that works out, see if, people like it a little better. I like I said, the last layover kind of showed off that in order for my previous style to work, I have to have something nice to say about the book. And that was impossible with as bad of a book as I read. So yeah, I'm going to do that, see how it works out, maybe go back, maybe stick with it. I'll decide based on how this month goes. So yeah, now to get to the real reason most of you are here. My mid-year freakout. So I've already technically missed the days for the mid-year freakout. I think it was supposed to take place around the summer solstice area. But I was out of town for like 8 days, so I didn't really have a time to record this and edit it alongside the last layover stuff, which I was already committed to at that point. However, it is tradition for Book 2, so I want to do it before the month ends at least. At least as the month end, I guess, suppose. But I'm not going to go into the history of it, but I like it, and you know what? It's good. So as of this moment, I've officially read a little over 20-something books so far. Now, since I'm mostly reading books and commenting, and I would have a higher total normally, but plans, this channel, etc., etc. But anyways, so let's start, shall we? So, the best book I've read so far in 2021. That's pretty easy. I will have to go with Firestarter. See, Firestarter was very much a surprise for me. I've always heard with Stephen King it's very hit or miss when it comes to his book. Either the books are really good or they're really mediocre. I've never really heard he has really bad ones yet, but I have heard that they can be very mediocre. And one of the things about King is his endings are often very disappointing into what he built up to. But for me, Firestarter honestly avoided all those worries I had. It was a really good book, and I'm just honestly surprised with how good it was, and it makes me even more excited to read all those Stephen King books I haven't yet. So yeah, best book of 2021, Firestarter. The best sequel I've read in 2022. I realize I've been saying 2021 up until this point. I know the year. Don't question me. But the best sequel I've read so far is actually Jim Butcher's Summer Night. This is one of the last books I read before I started doing this review channel. And up until then, I had a very mixed relationship with Dresden Files. I liked the series, don't get me wrong. But I found that oftentimes the mystery angle which the book was, proposed to me on was very disappointing. But in both the first book, the guy was obvious. The second book, it was impossible to know, and Dresden only found out by luck. And in the third book, the person is someone we're told it can't possibly be. So the book kind of lies to us to maintain the mystery. And in addition to that, each of the previous books started off for me worse than the previous one, only to get better at the very end. And while that's definitely good, I found that, for the most part, reading a book thinking, this isn't as good as the last work, isn't as enjoyable as just thinking, okay, this is just better all around. So thankfully, I can say the Summer Night does exactly that. I like this book the whole way through. I think the mystery is the best one of the series. And it's something you can figure out by yourself without luck, without being lied to, or without it being extremely obvious who it is. I mean, it's still kind of obvious, but at the same time, I liked it. So this, for me, is the best sequel. It was between this or The Legend of Drizzt Exile, but honestly, I had to go with this because, like I said, it's just a fast improvement, whereas Legend of Drizzt Exile is just a minor improvement on an already good series. So, yeah. A new release I haven't read, but want to. See, this one is difficult, because I'm very behind when it comes to books. And so when it comes to new releases and stuff like that, I'm not well ventured in that regard. So yeah, give me a sec. I'll decide. Oh, that's it right there. If I had to choose, I would probably say Skandar and the Unicorn Thief by A.F. Stedman. I think it's Stedman. Could be Steedman, but I'm pretty sure it's Stedman. This is a book about a 13-year-old kid who dreams of becoming a respected unicorn writer and competing in the Chaos Cup. To me, it looks very Percy Jackson and the Olympians in its style. It's probably a young adult, but honestly, looking at it, it just looks like an interesting read. It looks like something I would enjoy, and I can't find it yet because I do most of my stuff thrift shopping. So honestly, that's my most anticipated book that was released this year, but I haven't read. The most anticipated release for the second half of 2022. Again, I don't keep up very well with news, so I'm going to have to look that up. Oh, there it is. I would have to say my most anticipated soon-to-be-released book in 2022 will probably be Stephen King's Fairy Tale. Mostly because I've actually heard of it, and it looks interesting. Something that Stephen King could write, kind of like a mix of Dark Tower and Modern Day World. And it just sounds like a fun read, even if it might end up not being. So, number 5, my biggest disappointment this year. Doctor Who's Only Human. Yeah, those of you who've read the book, who've seen my review, already know most of my thoughts involving this. Yeah, this was very disappointing. I was expecting it to be a lot better than it really was, only to find it read like a script that was hastily turned into a book, but wasn't really expanded on to be a book. For those of you who don't know, you can't just take a script and make it a book because scripts and books are written fundamentally different. So yeah, I was just hoping to be a lot better than it really was. It was bland, boring. A lot of the book was pointless. It wasn't very good. It wasn't as bad as The Last Layover, don't get me wrong. But it wasn't good. 6, my biggest surprise. Well, that's easy. Dark Life by Cat Falls. Now, I read this a bit before I started this channel, but this is a young adult novel about a post-apocalyptic world involving a teenager with superpowers. Yeah, sounds awful right off the bat, doesn't it? That's like a recipe for disaster, especially since it was released in 2014. However, I was very pleasantly surprised by this book. This was a very good book. And I'm not just for a young, well, I guess mostly for a young adult novel. If this was more for adults, it probably wouldn't be as good. But I was surprisingly entertained about this book, and the only real complaint I had was that it was too short. There was a lot more I felt this author could do with this setting, and I trusted her to do it. So yeah, this was my biggest surprise this year. My new favorite author. I guess I really don't have one yet. I've always liked Stephen King. I liked Jim Butcher by last year when I actually started his series. I only know Cat Falls in this, and it could just be a fluke. So, unfortunately, I don't have a new favorite author at the current moment. At least not yet. I'll do a quick scout through my handy comp book, see if maybe I'm missing wrong. That's a no. So yeah, unfortunately, I don't have a new favorite author yet. At least, not yet. That might change. My newest fictional crush. Again, I really don't have one. I mean, none of these characters have really been a kind of person for me yet. So, again, apologies. None for me yet. Newest favorite character. Some of these questions just feel like they're there to make me stumble. When it comes to newest favorite characters, though, I mean, it's hard to decide. If I had to say one so far based on all I've read, Charlie McGee is probably the best of the new characters I've been introduced to. I like that she's a character who overcomes the darkness in her to do the right thing, even when it becomes extremely hard. Normally with horror stories or stories like this that try to purport themselves to be mature, and they tend to be more dark, not mature. So I would have to say Charlie McGee is probably my newest favorite character. At least this year. And as at this moment. So, a book that made me cry. None yet. I don't cry easy over the books. There's a couple things that will get me every time. I still cannot see the Going Mary's death without busting into tears. I cried over Marley and Me, but when it comes to books, it's a lot harder for me to cry. So, unfortunately, none. A book that made me happy. I mean, any book I like makes me happy. I don't really have a specific one that makes me the happiest just yet. I haven't really read a feel-good book that sole purpose was to make me really happy. So, unfortunately, I can't weigh into that. I guess I have books that make me happy because now I own them. But, again, I don't really have an answer for this one. I apologize. That's been like this for the past 4 answers. So, favorite book to movie adaptation I've seen so far. I actually haven't watched a lot of movies this year. Yeah, I guess I don't have one of these either. Apologies. I have seen adaptations of books to movies, but I haven't read the book in order to justify it. So, I mean, I can't answer this right now. Apologies. The favorite review I've written this year. This I can't answer. And believe it or not, it's The Last Layover. As mad as I got at that book, as awful as it was, as much as I played up how mad I was at the book, it was a lot of fun to write, it was a lot of fun to film, and it really pushed me to learn new things about my editing software. So all in all, I would say it's my favorite review so far this year. It's definitely nowhere near my favorite book. And you know what? I probably won't I won't ever say anything nice about that book beyond this. But yeah, that was my favorite review this year. The most beautiful book I bought this year. The most beautiful book I bought this year? This version of Witches Steeped in Gold. I love the way this book looks. I mean, look at it. Look at this dust cover. It's beautiful. And the funny thing is, this isn't even my main copy of Witches Steeped in Gold, because I actually found a version of the book that was signed by the author in a thrift store. And, yeah. I snapped that up right away. What books do I really need to read by the end of this year? There's a couple. Everything on my TBR. Honestly, everything. Personally. I need to read it all. But that's an impossible task, considering I'd have to read a book a day at this rate. But one I really do have to read this year is at least a book that was given to me by one of my sister's friends called SWF by RLJ. It's a self-published work on Amazon. So I've been reading through that from here. So yeah. That's at least the one book I can say for sure I need to read by the end of this year. I might even do a review on it. That's been what's questioned of me. Another one I need to read this year is definitely another one of my Casey McQuiston books, because I've had them long enough and I need to at least read one, and I've heard great things about it. Who is my new favorite community member? Honestly, it's hard to choose. All of them are so great. I've met a lot of great people doing this channel, and so many of them are just amazing people. At least so it seems. And I can't pick a favorite. I like so many. Yeah, no, if you have any, if you want to check out any of these people, I will link down all of them. Well, not all of them. I'll link down a good portion of them down below. So I highly suggest that if you like my videos or you just like BookTube in general, go check them out, because they're awesome. But as it comes, that's the end. That's the Midyear Freakout tag. I've talked about it, and it's time to move on. My first review will be up at Monday normally. Another thing I wanted to do this year, because I didn't quite bring it up with my July TBR, is I'm going to try to release videos on Friday. These aren't going to be book reviews, but these are going to be more... Let's say that they're going to be more about just general stuff. I'm probably going to do a bookshelf walkthrough eventually. I want to do video essays. That sounds a lot of fun, and the one I'm currently working on, I will be doing so with the help of a YouTuber named Rukari. She's a Let's Player, but she's a great person. You really should check her out. I'm going to put her down in the link below as well. Check out Kitty Coco Games too. She's a great person. I love her Let's Plays as well. But anyways, so when it comes to that, yeah, I'm going to start doing things. I'm going to start doing releases on Monday and Friday. With the Friday being more, I'll skip them if I can't do anything. And they're just going to be more unrelated to the books in general. It might just be the books like this, if I don't have much to say about them. Video essays, bookshelf walkthroughs, stuff like that. So yeah, that'll be all. Remember, this is Afrodo Reviews. And remember, with every book comes an adventure. And every adventure is worth having.